before we get started with today's lesson, I just want us to review some elements of fiction, or what we also like to call them as story elements. So here I have definitions of 6 different ones. What I want you to do right now is I want you to take the next 30 seconds to think what those 6 elements are. Don't be shy. I want you to say it out loud, even if you're talking to yourself, because that's totally fine. Alrighty, so let me show you the notes. Alright, so our first element of fiction, or story element, are our characters. The characters are the main actors in a story. And as I'm going over these 6 elements of fiction, I want you to be thinking about specifically Grandfather's Journey by Alan Tse. Okay? The setting is where and when a story takes place. The conflict is a problem or something that is difficult for the characters or something the characters want to achieve. The events are what happens in a story as characters try to achieve a goal. Okay? And you'll notice that events, when we talk about events, we usually talk about sequence. And so I want you to think as you listen and reread Grandfather's Journey with me, if you see any sequence words, to see if time is passing. Then we have our resolution, how the characters finally solve or do not solve the problem. And again, the conflict doesn't need to be a problem. Sometimes it's a goal. Okay? And finally, the central message. Especially for our students in class 324, that is Miss Bala and my class, we should know this definition of central message, what the author is trying to teach you, because we've been drilling it since September. And it's also an important idea that the story conveys. So as we reread Grandfather's Journey, I want you to be thinking about, what do you think Alan Tse is trying to teach us in this book? Grandfather's Journey by Alan Tse. My grandfather was a young man when he left his home in Japan and went to see the world. He wore European clothes for the first time and began his journey on a steamship. The Pacific Ocean astonished him. For 3 weeks, he did not see land. When land finally appeared, it was the New World. He explored North America by train and riverboat and often walked for days on end. Deserts with rocks like enormous sculptures amazed him. The endless farm fields reminded him of the ocean he had crossed. Huge cities of factories and tall buildings bewildered and yet excited him. He marveled at the towering mountains and rivers as clear as the sky. He met many people along the way. He shook hands with black men and white men, with yellow men and red men. The more he traveled, the more he longed to see new places and never thought of returning home. Of all the places he visited, he liked California best. He loved the strong sunlight there, the Sierra Mountains, the lonely seacoast. After a time, he returned to his village in Japan to marry his childhood sweetheart. Then he brought his bride to the new country. They made their home by the San Francisco Bay and had a baby girl. As his daughter grew, my grandfather began to think about his own childhood. He thought about his old friends. He remembered the mountains and rivers of his home. He surrounded himself with songbirds, but he could not forget Finally, when his daughter was nearly grown, he could wait no more. He took his family and returned to his homeland. Once again, he saw the mountains and rivers of his childhood. They were just as he had remembered them. Once again, he exchanged stories and laughed with his old friends. But the village was not a place for a daughter from San Francisco, so my grandfather bought a house in a large city nearby. There, the young woman fell in love, married, and some time later, I was born. When I was a small boy, my favorite weekend was a visit to my grandfather's house. He told me many stories about California. He raised warblers and silver eyes, but he could not forget the mountains and rivers of California, so he planned a trip. But a war began. Bombs fell from the sky and scattered our lives like leaves in a storm. When the war ended, there was nothing left of the city and of the house where my grandparents had lived. So they returned to the village where they had been children. But my grandfather never kept another songbird. The last time I saw him, my grandfather said that he longed to see California one more time. He never did. And when I was nearly grown, I left home and went to see California for myself. After a time, I came to love the land my grandfather had loved, and I stayed on and on until I had a daughter of my own. But I also missed the mountains and rivers of my childhood. I miss my old friends. So I return now and then when I cannot still the longing in my heart. The funny thing is, the moment I am in one country, I am homesick for the other. I think I know my grandfather now. I miss him very much. All right, so here you have your text-dependent questions, also known as your TDQs. So these questions are going to be answered through the text Grandfather's Journey, and also these questions help us get our minds ready so that we can understand our story better. All right, so I'm going to read the directions. Please follow along with me. Directions. Please answer the following 6 questions. You do not have to write the answers in complete sentences. Woohoo! Please feel free to write down the answers note-taking style. So if you can have the read aloud playing, and you can have these 6 questions out so that you can be typing the notes as you hear the story. I will also have the book available and materials in the Google Classroom or in our Google Drive folder, so that you can also read the text if you'd like on your own as well. So let me read these questions to you out loud. The first question is, who are the characters in the story? Okay. Number 2 is, who is the main character of the story and how do you know? Number 3, who tells the story and how do you know? The person who is telling the story or recounting a story is called the narrator. Number 4, where is the story set? This is also the setting. And number 5 is, how is the setting important to this story? And finally, number 6 is, based on the events of the story, how is the word journey different from a trip? So yesterday we talked about how journey means a very long trip. And now I want you to think how that is related to the events in the story. What tells us that this is a journey that grandfather is taking rather than just a trip? Alrighty, so what I want you to do today is I want you to fill out this story elements graphic organizer. However, what I want you to fill out is just the first 3 rows, okay? What I want you to fill out is the setting, the character's goal, and the plot, okay? I just want you to fill these 3 boxes. And here, to make this a little bit easier, So what I want you to do here is I want you to make sure you are writing in complete sentences. And in that first box, I want you to write where and when does the story take place. It may be more than one place. Hint, hint, it is more than one place. So please write down the different places that our main character travels to. Okay. Next, in this box, I want you to write the character's goal. What does the main character want in the story? As you've heard this book twice, or maybe 3 times or 4 times, our main character of Grandfather's Journey is Grandfather. So for this box, I want you to think, what does Grandfather want in this story? And finally, the last box you are going to fill out for today, Tuesday, in this graphic organizer is the plot. I want you to write down at least 4 events in order of how Grandfather tries to attain his goal. Okay? So I only want you to do these 3 rows today. Again, I only want you to do these 3 rows. So now we're moving on to the second part of our lesson today, which is answering the question, how do hooks work? But before we get to hooks, we need to remember the purpose of an introduction paragraph. An introduction paragraph makes clear for the reader what the topic is and what the main points are. It also gets the reader's attention. Now let's take a look at handout 1A, a model introduction paragraph. So let's take a look at what a model introduction paragraph looks like together. So here we have handout 1A. If you have your workbook at home, please follow along. If not, please just follow along with the screen. All right, so we need to see if this paragraph makes it clear for us as the readers what the topic is and what the main points are, as well as how does this paragraph get our attention. All right, please follow along as I read aloud. Why would a person leave his home, friends, and family to make a long, dangerous trip across the ocean and begin a new life in a strange country? For some, coming to America was a great adventure. For others, it was scary. There were many reasons that people made the decision to leave home. Many people left for America because they needed jobs. Some immigrants left for the United States because there was a famine in Europe. For others, there was little land to farm or live on, so people ended up in overcrowded conditions. So just to clarify what the word famine means, famine means an extreme shortage of food. So now I want us to look and see where in this introduction paragraph does this author catch our attention. So I want you to take a look at the first sentence. Why would a person leave his home, friends, and family to make a long, dangerous trip across the ocean and begin a new life in a strange country? This sentence catches our attention because it's asking us a question, an engaging question. So I'm going to circle that now. So this catches our attention. This first sentence makes me want to know more about why people would make a long, dangerous trip across the ocean. Now what I want you to try to do is find the topic of this paragraph. What do you think the topic of this paragraph is? I'm going to give you about 15 seconds. Alright, so the topic of this paragraph are the many reasons that people made the decision to leave home. This is our topic. This paragraph tells us that this piece of writing is going to explain the many different reasons that people left home. We know this because all of the other sentences in this paragraph tell us about why people left their homes. For example, they needed jobs, there was a famine, and there was little land to farm or live on. So I want us to label the 3 main points, the 3 main reasons that is stated in our introduction paragraph. And I'm going to label it in green. Okay? So because they needed jobs is 1. They left because there was a famine. That's 2. And because there was little land to farm or live on. That's 3. So you see here in our model introduction paragraph, we have a sentence that catches our attention. We have our topic or our topic statement. And then we have 3 main points that support our topic statement. This should sound very familiar to most of us. So hooks are sentences or a sentence that catches the reader's attention. There are 3 types that I want you to know. The first is a question. Questions make readers wonder about something and give them a purpose for reading. The second is emotions. Emotions make readers interested in a topic that they might not have thought about before. And the last one I want you to think about are facts. Facts help readers gain new information and can make them curious about a topic. So finally, for our last activity today, I'm going to read out loud this article to you. I did not show you the introduction paragraph because I want you to write your own hook for this article. This article is taken from PBS Kids, and I'm going to read out loud for you. Please follow along as I read aloud. To escape war. When people go to war, innocent families and children get caught in the crossfire, and often the only way to survive is to find a new country to live in. Sometimes this means picking up and walking hundreds of miles across the nearest border, and sometimes it means traveling halfway around the world. People who immigrate to escape war are called refugees because they're seeking a refuge from the conflict. To escape famine or other natural disasters. War isn't the only thing that creates refugees. Drought, when there's not enough rain for crops, can lead to famine and starvation. Disease can spread and become a plague, and earthquakes, floods, and hurricanes can devastate whole nations. When these types of catastrophes hit, lots of people have no choice but to find a new place to live. To escape persecution. Governments are not always fair and they aren't always just. Often, a certain group of people living in a nation will be singled out for harsh, unfair treatment. They may have certain rights taken away, or be denied freedoms, or even be physically harmed just because of who they are. Sometimes the government does this directly, and other times the government just looks the other way while another group of citizens does the dirty work. This treatment is called persecution, and people who are persecuted in one nation often move to another, where they believe they can start a new life and be treated as equals. To find greater freedom. Even when people aren't actively persecuted, they may feel like their home country doesn't offer the same liberties people in other places get to have. As long as people dream of freedom, many will be willing to move to a new country to find it. To find work. As unfair as it is, the world has always been divided into poor nations and wealthier ones. There are countries that offer plenty of opportunities and jobs, and countries where those things are scarce. This is one of the biggest reasons people become immigrants. They're simply looking for a place where they can work hard, earn money, and support themselves and their families. If people can't earn a living where they are, they'll sometimes move to wherever there are better chances for them to do that. To join relatives and reunite families. So much of who we are comes from the country we're from. But family bonds are sometimes even stronger, and the pain of having a loved one live far away can be enough to make people start over in a new place. If your sister, your dad, or your child moves overseas, you might want to move too. For their children. Kids are one of the biggest reasons people uproot themselves and move to another country. Simply put, parents want their children to have a better life than they did. Now, after reading this article, I want you to answer the assignment in Google Classroom that is titled Hook, where you can write your hook for this article. Alrighty, that's all for today's lesson. I know it was a lot, but thank you so much for listening through this whole video. Please feel free to email me with any questions, and I'll talk to you tomorrow.